A watershed is an area of land that drains its water to the same place, usually a river, lake, or ocean. All the land on Earth is divided into watersheds. The highest points in a land area define each watershed. If you live in the mountains, peaks and ridges make up the boundary of your watershed. Even if you live in areas that look very flat, there are little dips and rises in the land that direct water through your habitat. Let's put together our own watershed. This will help us understand how watersheds affect our life and how we affect watersheds. Here's a river. Let's call the river Sinking Canoe. We know that we need to look at the land area around the river to see how water will move through our watershed. Let's say there are some hilly areas over here, some grassy meadows in this area, and a wetlands over here. Maybe some of the streams in our watershed create a small lake whose outflow enters our river. The weatherman is calling for rain. Let's see what happens. The rain comes down all over our watershed. Some of it keeps going down into the earth and becomes groundwater. The rest of it becomes runoff. Now remember, water is powerful. As the runoff flows over the land, it starts busting up leaves and other organic matter on the ground and carries this stuff with it. It also picks up dirt and even unsuspecting bugs. The runoff keeps flowing downhill until it reaches a small stream. Here the water and everything it's carrying enters the network of waterways in our watershed. The leaves and bugs and stuff now become nutrients or food for animals that live in and around the water. Insects, microorganisms, and plants all eat the stuff. This helps clean the water. These plants and animals also use oxygen. Some animals, like this trout, need lots of oxygen, while other animals can survive with very little. Some of the water in our waterways will enter Skateboard Lake. Lakes are the Earth's major storage areas for fresh surface water.
Here the water can settle down. Because the water is moving slower, the dirt and organic matter being carried slowly drifts to the bottom. This is called sedimentation. This is another way that nature helps clean water.
Lakes also offer natural flood protection by spreading the water over a large area. Imagine adding 1 inch of water across an entire lake surface. You'd probably hardly even notice. Many lakes go through a natural aging process called eutrophication. Over time, the sediments from runoff and streams begin to fill in the lake. The nutrients entering the lake promote plant growth. As some of those plants die, their stems and leaves become nutrients for microorganisms and more plants, and so on. Eventually, there are so many plants and microorganisms that they use up all the oxygen, and animals that need a lot of oxygen can't survive. In time, that lake fills in, and it isn't a lake anymore. It could become a wetland.
There isn't anything wrong with eutrophication. It's a natural process. If a lake turns into a wetland, it's still a very important part of our ecosystem.
Wetlands are places that stay wet for most of, or all of the year. Duh, wet land. They are important for many reasons. Like lakes, wetlands offer natural flood protection by spreading the water out. And look at all of these great places to make a home. This is paradise for birds and frogs and tons of other wildlife. The bottom of a wetland is made up of bits and pieces of dead plants. It soaks up water like a sponge and stores it during dry times. If we take another look at our watershed, we see that there is a forest area and some meadows. As we mentioned earlier, some water slowly seeps into the ground. Meadows and forests are key to helping this happen.
If you've ever walked through a forest or a meadow, the ground feels kind of soft, like wetland. The decaying plants, branches, and leaves act like a sponge, sucking up the water.
Although some water will become runoff, these spongy areas hold water long enough to allow it to be pulled into the earth by gravity. The earth acts as a super filter. When it finally becomes part of an aquifer, it's very clean. But the water doesn't just sink into the ground and sit there. Groundwater will flow sideways too. For example, during dry periods, groundwater might flow into a stream or river. Here's another example of how the Earth's water systems are connected. Eventually, much of the water from the lake, mountains, forests, meadows, and wetlands in our watershed will enter the Sinking Canoe River. some of it through surface water and some from groundwater. Talk about being connected. Not just the water ends up here, so does everything that came along for the ride.